folks. I want to welcome you back to my ongoing series of what is the talking cure, a two-track theory. If you've been watching the previous videos on YouTube, or if you're following me on WordPress, and if you happen to be seeing also my two books, The Talking Cure, which I have right here, volumes 1 and 2, The Talking Cure, a lifetime of work and research on helping people learn what it means to really change from the inside out. And I'm excited about maybe giving you the next step, the next installment, kind of a meta level of what needs to be done to help people really change so that we can offer each other successful relationships, so we can be doing prevention, doing medical, psychiatric, mental health, counseling, relational prevention, as well as the talking cure in the traditional sense. As many of you know who've been following me for some time now that I'm working on a couple of new books that I'll tell you about them in the days to come. But also the Talking Cure is getting ready to go through a facelift, so to speak, any kind of an update, and that there's so many misconceptions of what is the talking cure. What does that really mean? The term itself, the talking cure, came out of a case about 100 years ago, where a patient was talking to one of the doctors, one of my predecessors, 150 years ago, before I was there on the planet, obviously. But they're in Paris, and there's a patient that she said, it seems like that the more I'm opening up, the more I talk about my problems, the better I feel, and the more, the healthier I become. And so she said, this is kind of like a talking cure. So this is what it's really all about. Now, of course, the talking cure has taken some major directions and some other courses, some off the track, some off the grid, so to speak. But the talking cure has been relegated to simply believing that if we just talk to each other in kind of anemic ways, that if we just learn how to talk to each other, then that's all that needs to be done. And that so many therapists, counselors, psychiatrists, and psychologists have jumped on the bandwagon and have said, yes, this is what we need to do, learning how to talk to people, and that we can then create something new in people's lives. Unfortunately, nobody is talking today, or no one is really trained to know how to talk today. And so my friends, my colleagues in the world of psychology or psychiatry, no one has trained in the field that I call comprehensive psychotherapy. My diploma here on the wall says that I'm also trained and certified to treat patients in a comprehensive psychotherapeutic way, and that I'm certified to do things like that. Essentially, folks, it's a thrust to push back toward what I would suggest is the talking cure. So what's happened in the last maybe 4 or 5 decades is that when people think of a talking cure, they think that it's something that we just do with people by telling them what to do, by telling them don't do this and do that, or if a patient is bipolar, or if the patient has borderline personality disorder or narcissism, then all they have to do is just learn how to stop doing that, and then they're all good to go. But as I'm suggesting, the talking cure, unlike what's happening the last 50 years, and I want you to imagine this, if you were someone seeking help today, if you're looking for help with a psychiatrist, psychologist, and mental health specialist, that typically you're going to go to somebody who she is trained in probably what's called a cognitive behavioral approach. Now, is there a place for that? Change your thinking, change your behavior? Yes, I was trained by that too, by my predecessors and some pretty world-renowned people in the world. And unfortunately, we all began to discover that what changes people is not a cognitive behavioral approach, because cognition is more, if you think of the brain is right here in your hand, and you open up your hand, and then we have an upstairs and we have a downstairs, so to speak. The upstairs would be the cortical parts, our thinking parts, our language parts, our speech parts, and that we're still tested on these on licensing exams, whether you're doing it in counseling, whether you're doing it in psychiatry and psychology. This is the scientists who discovered this were from Europe, and this time I'm talking about doctors called Broca, B-R-O-C-A, and a doctor called Wernicke. And both of these doctors discovered that our ability to understand language, our ability to speak the language, are basically up here in the higher cortical parts of the brain and the nervous system. And so really, folks, for the last 50 years, no kidding, no exaggeration, that there really has not been a talking cure from the bottom up. And many doctors want to debate this in terms of the research centers, in terms of making it all about some kind of unconscious drives or libidinal stuff that gets kind of technical, that we're all hardwired and we're all driven by these drives. And there was a lot of misreading, especially of the early doctors and scientists, especially some misreadings with Freud. And Freud talked about the libidinal drive that comes from the bottom up. But as a neuroscientist as well, I've discovered that there are typical drives, and that these drives are drives about, I'm going to go out there and seek. I want to go out there and move into the world with confidence and courage and aggression, and to assert myself. Well, when I'm in depression, that drive is, of course, subjugated. That drive basically is not turned on. And so why is it not the case? Why is it not a surprise when you see somebody who's depressed, whether it's a girl, woman, man, boy, an adult, that they're get up and go, got up and went, that old joke, and that these folks were living through major depression. You see, folks, the approach I'm taking to help people in the Talking Cure is an approach that really requires a three-legged stool, as you've heard me talk about, a three-legged stool. Unfortunately for the spiritual people, for the religious people out there today, that whether you're Christian or whether you happen to be Jewish or Muslim, I would suggest in a loving way that you've adopted a IHOP view of, think of the Pancake House, think of the IHOP view, a one-legged view of what real change looks like. And instead of a three-legged stool that's nice and sturdy when we put our weight on, and that we're able to hold us up, the foundation is good, and I believe that that three-legged stool represents that for Christians and especially religious people, whether you're Islamic, Muslim, or Jewish, we want to follow our religious book. For Christians, it's the Bible. For Christians also, we want to believe in the Holy Spirit's leading in our lives. I call that the second leg. And then the third leg would be for the Christian, the three-legged stool would be the people of God, a community that learns how to regulate each other, how to rewire each other in real time, and not just going through little booklets and filling in the pages and doing all the things that we typically do in our local communities today. So the radical game changer is now that a real change requires an inside outward look, an inside look. But the inside doesn't end there, it begins there in terms of what's going on. What's going on for Arch, what's going on for me on a story level. Too many doctors and too many theoreticians have made psychology, psychiatry is all about a story, a bigger story, the narrative, the meta-narrative. And I wrote about that early days in my research for my dissertation. And so there's something to that. However, it doesn't go far enough in my humble estimation. A story is fine, but we need to know what neurodynamics are working or not working in terms of the individual sitting here. So let me say it again. If you're new to this video series, let me say it again. That I'm suggesting that all of our mental health problems and the majority of our medical problems, and maybe even all of them, are coming from a dysregulated brain, body, nervous system that work together in terms of the connection, the interaction between the two. So in real time, if we had the training, if we knew how to do this, then we would be able to help each other in real time. Whether you're a child who's going through childhood struggles, maybe it's ADHD, ADD stuff, or maybe it's oppositional defiance, or conduct issues, or separation anxiety issues for children and older kids. Maybe I'm afraid to stay away from home for the night for the 24 hours. Maybe that brings on too much anxiety and too much stress for those kids. Or if I have attention problems, if I'm going through my local pediatric direction and I'm being put on a stimulant, something like a Ritalin or an Adderall or something like that. See, these folks, these psychopharmacological approaches are essentially a top-down approach, that we're working on cognitive structures, we're working on neurochemicals, and it's much deeper than that. As my patient who just had a heart attack, and his cardiologist said, his electrophysiologist said, your problem is, see, you have electrical problems, and that's the issue. You see, folks, it's much deeper than that. It's more complicated than that. And my good friend, who's an electrophysiologist, happens to be a reductionist. That we're taking the complexity of what's going on in the human mind, the brain, and remember, the brain and the mind are not the same thing. That we have the ability now, when I look at your brain, I'm looking at the neurochemicals, the neuro structure of the apparatus of the brain, as an engineer would, or I'm looking at it from a neurochemical standpoint. But also, the brain is not the mind. And the mind is where the story's at. The mind is essentially how I repress, or I'm stuffing, as we used to say. If I'm sitting on that beach ball in the swimming pool, trying to submerge it, trying to keep it under the water, or I might even be doing disassociation, where I think I'm regulating, I think I'm addressing problems, I'm dealing with stuff, but now, boom, it now becomes automatic that I'm repressing or disassociating. So many folks are disassociating, and it's not out of sight, out of mind, but it's a form of not knowing. It's a form of pushing back, and that we think, okay, it's not in my mind right now, whether it's stress, or it's worrying about the kids, worrying about your job, is there enough money? We think about that we're distancing ourselves from those emotions, but when we're actually disassociating, and that this disassociation process goes into the mind and the brain, and so we have those two systems that work together. So the challenge is this, as I challenge my medical friends, is that when they're examining a patient, when they're looking at the neurologist and examining the brain, or they're examining the heart, if they're cardiologists, or if they're family physicians, and just kind of looking at the whole thing, I always challenge them, but why aren't you looking at the person's mind? Why don't you spend more than 6 minutes, 10 minutes to understand what's really going on for them? And they say to me, my medical friends say to me, we don't have the time to do it, we don't have the training to do it, we don't have the skill set to do it. So that's why we send them folks to you. And I'm grateful for the referral. But folks, just as there is a major shortage in the world, the major shortage is that doctors in the world, we have a major shortage of people who are neuroscientifically trained, as I am, and also an analysis to be able to know how to take these two-track theory, or what I'm calling the talking cure, on 2 levels and be able to take it to a new level. And that's what I believe the talking cure is about. So if you want to imagine what it's like, I want you to think in terms of an arousal systems. I'll be very brief in this lecture, but I want you to think in terms of arousal systems. These systems are working like they should. It's kind of like having your monitoring system on your security system at home. Some of you have the remote control when you leave the house. You're able to turn that remote control on. You have a monitor that monitors your home, keeps you safe, keeps us protected 24/7. Well, this is what the brain and mind have, and it's a monitoring system. And it actually happens to be in the lower subcortical parts of the brain, and in the brain system, in the brainstem area, and the cerebral, and the cerebellum area, if you're British, that you want to know that this monitoring system is observing everything that's going on. It's observing what's happening externally in your life, and it's observing what's happening internally in your life too, and that the system is working all the time. And that in order to understand this system, I've created the language that I call a gas pedal and a brake pedal. So if you're driving down the interstate, and you're driving too fast, you've got the automatic cruise control on, you might be doing 70 when we should be doing 65 or whatever, then we know we can pull back or release the cruise control, and then the car begins to slow down, and then boom, we can put back on automatic control, and then the car goes into a nice simulation, an automation process. You see, folks, this is the same kind of thing that's happening in the brain, mind, body. And that the reductionism, as I mentioned on previous videos, the reductionism of the past, that we're still being taught this, whether it's in medical school and graduate school, colleges, or when you go see your physician or when you see your provider is probably a reductionist, and she doesn't realize it. And that she's examining this system, whether it's the kidneys or the heart, when they're not realizing that this monitoring system is what's keeping an eye on what's going on. So in order to understand this gas pedal and brake pedal, we need to understand that these are driven by arousal systems. So what are arousal systems? They are electrical systems, they are chemical systems, they are emotional systems, and they're moving the car, the human being, into hyper arousal, anxiety states. I'm just out of control. Maybe for some it's bipolar, or for some who get really sluggish, or my patients who tell me, look, I'm not aware of depression, I'm only aware of fatigue, I'm only aware of being exhausted. And what they don't realize until I bring it to them, their attention, is that their nervous system, brain and body and mind are moving into a hypo-arousal. Hyper and hypo. And in order to understand the process of hyper and hypo-arousal, is that when these systems begin to malfunction, they then set in motion the monitoring system. And so the monitoring system then begins to attempt to modify. It's looking for cues. It's sending out signals on neurochemical and electrical levels. And now we've discovered a third system. Not only do we have the hyper and hyperarousal in the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic, sorry for the big medical words, we also have a third system, and these are called the vagal systems. And the vagal systems are electrical systems that are part of the cranial system. They go into the face, and they go into the back of the brain, and they're connected here in the subcortical parts of the brain stem, and that these three systems begin to try to compensate or regulate for what's going on in terms of the brain and body. So in terms of the narrative form, if you think of a ladder is what? Usually have about 18 steps. So I want you to think in terms of a ladder, the analogy of a ladder. At the top of the ladder, the body, brain, and mind are wired to feel safe. I need to feel 1000% safe with you. You need to feel that way with me. And when the nervous system is not feeling safe, or let me back up, when we are feeling safe, then all of the other systems below, all the other rungs on the ladder will be working like they should. That the monitoring system is not going to send out an alarm. It's not going to send out an alert that there's danger. But when the arousal system starts taking a dip, and we get halfway into the ladder, as a young man, 8-year-old, just recently told me, I said, "Where do you think you're on the ladder, young man?" And he said, I think I'm somewhere in the middle of the ladder, Doc. I think I'm in the middle somewhere. And I said, how cute, how smart. You already even recognize that. So what's making us go up and down on the ladder, it's these arousal states that are driven by emotion, that are driven by affect. And that we now know that from previous videos, and you should know this by now, is that the right hemisphere is where we process affect, emotion, or stories. It drives it's the central engine that drives, it's the engine in the car. It's the new Corvette that has that engine right in the middle. The right hemisphere is what drives the whole Corvette, this 100,000 plus automobile. And so this is the right hemisphere that's doing all the work for my life and your life, or should be doing all the work in my life and your life. So I'm suggesting when the right hemisphere is dysregulating, when it's moving outside of these arousal states in a safe place, then we're taking a dip down the rungs somewhere. And that by the time I get all the way down to the bottom, and this doesn't take a long time, this can be happening immediately. This happens right there in milliseconds, that my arousal system can take immediately a dive where I can be at the bottom of the ladder. And at the bottom of the ladder, I'm feeling stuck, I feel hopeless, I feel unhappy, I feel frozen for some people, and I just feel immobilized. I can't do anything. And so, what's unfortunate today, folks, is that most of us have not been aware or trained to know what to do when these things are happening as quickly in our life, in my life, and in your life, in real time. And what do we do with them? So I'm suggesting that our marital problems are the result of these arousal systems gone awry. I'm saying our medical problems are the result of this. And I'm saying also our mental health problems are problems that need treatment, counseling. And that medications alone, as good as they can be and helpful, they're not enough to help rewire the nervous system. So the bottom line is that we need to create the kind of context where there can be healthy, safe, seen, soothed, and safe places, secure places, that when we do it together, then we're at the top. We're top at the bottom. We're top of the ladder. A friend of mine who just got back from Africa, he's an African missionary, and he told me the story that after talking to many different tribes in the African language, they taught him a word. I won't pretend to know the word or use the word, but they taught him a word, and that the word in African means is that we cannot be true persons. We can't really be true human beings if we don't know how to do that, if we don't know how to relate with another human being, so that when we come together, that this is how we become persons. This is how we become true beings and how we become true people. And folks, that's very explosive. And my friend Mike, when he told me this, he said, Doc, I knew that you would think this is amazing after all I've heard you talk about, the importance of relationships, the importance of this three-legged stool you talk about. And I said, exactly, Mike, that's pretty awesome. So the question for us is, how do the African tribes know this? How did they learn this? See, that they didn't become neuroscientists, they didn't become analysts to figure this out, but they figured it out on themselves by knowing that to become a true person, that we need each other, and we need to learn how to do it together. You see, folks, that's the talking cure. And the talking cure is more than just simply talking to each other. The talking cure is more than just getting together. And for you Christian people, it's more than just going to church. It's more than just reading your Bible. The talking cure is a whole new methodology that if we knew the dynamics behind it, if we knew the philosophical, the theological, the scientific, and medical background behind it, then we would be able to see a new revolution taking place in my life and your life. You see, folks, that's the talking cure. And I'm excited to present this short video to you about this ladder and how we need to learn how to create these in our lives in this construction, and that, no kidding, that we all need to be under construction in my life and in your life. I've mentioned it before and on a previous occasion that the acronym I have for this is PEOPLE. People encouraging each other to learn how to live effectively. People encouraging each other how to live effectively. That's the talking cure. And the dividends are incredible. It will help prevent your medical problems, whether cancer, diabetes, whether it's heart disease, you name it, whether it's diverticulitis, whether it's fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome. Folks, we have a revolution on hands. But before we can experience a new revolution, we've got to be able to create a new reformation. And the new reformation is understand how to actually create this kind of a construct in the middle of our reductionistic world and what I call our Pollyanna world, what I call our keep it simple, Simon kind of world. There's a place for simplicity, but when it comes to learning how to rewire each other, it has to happen on the mind, brain, and body level. And in order to do so, we need a three-legged stool. That we need Word of God, Spirit of God, and the people of God for Christian people. But you've got to go the extra step, folks, even Christians. You've got to learn how to put this together in a medical world, in a scientific framework. And that's the new paradigm shift that I'm requesting and arguing for. And so one of my life passages for you Christian folks is Romans 7:6. We don't want to live in the old way of the letter. And that would mean just a cognitive, behavioral stuff, or just telling people what to do. or just taking medication, or all these types of things. There's a place for that, but maybe a limited place when we understand the talking cure. So we don't want to live in the old way of the letter, but now we want to live in the new way of the Spirit. What does that really mean in my life and in your life? Folks, the talking cure can be our new revolution. And I ask you to join me, whether it's on YouTube videos, give me a call, whether it's following the 2 books on Amazon.com. They came out in Kindle not too long ago. And right now I'm going through a major reconstruction of all the books, a couple of books coming out, more lines of the talking cure, but taking it one in a technical sense, taking it more to another theoretical sense. The books are already finished in manuscript form. One is about 700 pages. One book is a medical book, which is also about 700, 800 pages. And then there's also a popular book coming out about learning how to do this. So boys and girls, moms or dads, individuals, we all need a talking cure. And we first need to know how to do it. And we need to go in training, whether it's learning how to play tennis, learning how to play golf, or whether it's physical therapy, whatever analogy you want to use. This is what the talking cure means for me and for you. I'm excited that you're joining in. Stay close, stay in touch, and you can find me on my YouTube channel. So you can find me also on WordPress, and you can also give me a call if you happen to be watching at 843-449-8154. Take care, and I'll see you next time.